Larry, let's put this on a personal level. As far as the incidence of AIDS and Kaposi sarcoma, I know that it's high, but from your personal experience, is it really that high? In other words, how many people do you know? How frequent is it in your experience?
I have lost a dozen friends already in the last year and a half, 2 years. 12 to 15 friends dead. I have another 15, 20 who have been diagnosed and are under treatment, and a good 6 or 7 who are in intensive care units in hospitals or are in hospitals currently, right now.
In the gay
That's a lot.
Yeah.
We were looking for some kind of an analogy, and someone came up with, it's like being in a foxhole and you don't know when you're going to get shot down next, who's going to be it. And I think a lot of us feel that way.
What have you been able to do for the community to?
Well, a bunch of us started something called Gay Men's Health Crisis, which has now grown to a group of about 150 volunteers. Oh, we've done everything. We've got absolutely no support from any government agency, from any city agency. We've done it all ourselves. We've raised about $100,000. We've given $50,000 of that away to research. We've put about 15,000 copies of that newsletter I showed you out to the public. It is the single most thorough piece of information that has been put out by anyone on all of AIDS. It has a complete bibliography. It has symptoms. It has a whole complete list of doctors in the New York City area. We're running support groups for patients. We are training doctors how to deal with people who may have life-threatening diseases. We've had to do that ourselves. We have support groups for the patients. We have arranged individual therapy for the patients. We are visiting patients in the hospital. We are putting dying patients together with their families whom they haven't seen in a number of years, who perhaps didn't even know they were gay. We have a hotline which we train volunteers to man, which is fielding anywhere from 25 to 50 calls a day from all over America, people, and these are not crank calls. These are calls from people who are saying, I'm concerned, I've got these kind of symptoms, I don't know what to do, I don't have a gay doctor, I don't have a doctor who's sympathetic, I don't have a doctor who knows about AIDS. It's just we don't feel we're doing anything because we're plugging up holes all the time. You try not to think about it. You just know that your best friend has died. You just know that a person you had a love affair with is in Lenox Hill Hospital with PCP, which has an 80% fatality rate, and you have to do that for him, and you have to do it for the people who have died or the people who are coming along, and you have to do it in the face of a city that is not giving us any help in terms of social. The mayor is in a newspaper like the New York Times, which if it prints anything on this will print an article this big on page D24. We have to get the information around. It's very hard. I mean, we're putting out a leaflet. We ourselves, this is something that should be done by, who knows, by the government, by the CDC. We are putting it. But even the gay community itself has not been, outside of New York, we've been the worst hit, as you know. We have 300, and as of the 22nd, we had 348 cases compared with half of that a year ago, and we have half of those people are dead in 1 year. When, as you know, with 2 cases occurring every single day. So we've been the worst hit, and so therefore perhaps we're the best mobilized. But it has happened in cities all over the country, and we have found a complete and utter lack of interest in it on part the gay and the medical and the straight communities altogether. What do you think? I was going to say, it's a medical mystery, and because it's such an incredible mystery, you would think that every newspaper in this country, like Sherlock Holmes, would be following this thing every single day, saying what is happening, new cases, mystery, what is causing it. Like with Legionnaire's disease. When Legionnaire's disease came out, it was on the front page, or toxic shock. It was on the front pages of the newspaper, every newspaper across the country, the entire duration of of what was causing it, because it was a straight thing. We've had more victims than both of those things combined, and 9/10 of the world doesn't even know about us.
Including the gay community.
Including, well, we're working our best, but yes, including the gay community. And with
Scientists at the National Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta today released the results of a study which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer. Robert Bazell now in Atlanta.
The Red Cross says the misconception that AIDS can be contracted by giving blood has caused a reduction in blood supplies in a number of cities.
Accusing the entire system, sir, of failing to respond with the same speed and the same commitment that might have been its motivation if those persons who are vulnerable to AIDS were in fact a member of another sociological group, sir.
Ambulance drivers have refused to take AIDS patients on occasion.
He asked one of the attendants, he told him that I had AIDS, and the person said outright, "I'm not touching him." Just like that.
And hospital workers have refused to take care of AIDS patients.
There's one crisis counselor at the Gay Men's Health Crisis who went 3 times a day to the hospital to feed his patient and wash him, bathe him, because the hospital had him in such isolation that nobody would go into his room.
Even the
homosexuality is a sin.
It was California Republican William Dannemeyer who recently declared on the House floor God's plan for man was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Dannemeyer leads a group of conservative Republicans who hope to make AIDS a political issue. They meet to plan strategy for bringing controversial AIDS-related legislation to the House floor.
We want to identify every person who's a carrier. We want to identify every possible way to stop them from spreading the disease. And we want to be open and honest about this disease before it becomes a really serious national health threat.
But more controversial are proposals to find and segregate those exposed to AIDS, to prohibit those with AIDS from working in health care, to make it a felony for those in an AIDS high-risk group to knowingly donate blood, and to prohibit children with AIDS from attending school. In New York City, a Republican campaign proposal to close all businesses that cater mainly to homosexual men. Also, mandatory blood tests for doctors, nurses, teachers, food handlers, and prostitutes.
I think it is one more instance of fag bashing. The men who come here who aren't well read about the disease are going to meet men here who are. It's a peer education. They're going to be educated by their peers. This place is not selling death any more than the heterosexual clubs are selling death. None of these clubs wants their clientele to die, and no gay man in this city wants to die, nor does he want his friends and lovers to die.
These people are raising money and signing petitions in a fight to keep Ryan White out of their school. They are parents of Ryan's schoolmates in Kokomo. They fear he could give their sons and daughters AIDS.
He has a spill on a table, a chair, something. Your daughter comes in, they say they wipe it up. Your daughter comes in, touches it. Hey, what's to say she is not going to get it?
They have filed suit to keep Ryan out of school as a health risk.
My daughter's in 2 of his classes, and I will not permit her to be in those classes again. I won't do it.
He died today. He was 18 years old. For the last 5 years, he lived with AIDS. He got it from a blood transfusion. He died in Indianapolis from an illness related to that disease.
5 years ago, just before Christmas, Ryan White was told he had AIDS and became a pariah among his playmates.
I became known as the AIDS boy.
Ryan at a Washington hearing 2 years ago.
It was my decision to live a normal life, go to school, be with friends, and enjoy day-to-day activities. It was not going to be easy. Even at church, people would not shake my hand.
Ryan was barred from his small-town Indiana school. His family went to court, fought and won, but finally moved away. His legacy?
I think Ryan has probably shown the world how to be truly courageous.
The gay rights community faces its biggest challenge as the Supreme Court hears argument today on laws in Georgia and about half the states that prohibit anal and oral sex.
There's only one sexual act which is legal in the state of Georgia, and everything else can get you 20 years.
The measure would bar persons with AIDS and those infected with AIDS virus from public and private schools, from commercial food handling facilities, and would subject them to isolation and quarantine.
It literally preys on people's bigotry, in people's hatred, in people's fears.
The proposed law could even include those suspected of having AIDS.
The initiative speaks only to people who are carriers of the virus. We have no test to determine that at this point.
AZT is known to cause severe side effects. It can destroy bone marrow that produces blood cells, making some patients dependent on blood transfusions. AZT is very expensive and will cost patients $8,000 to $10,000 a year. Tim Doyle, 27 years old, has been taking AZT since January, free of charge as part of the research. He left his job last week because of AIDS complications and doesn't know how he can pay for the drug now.
I know I can't afford it at all. I know it sounds strange, but there's a lot of things I've left I'd like to do.
White House officials felt that the president had to speak out because the disease has become the nation's overwhelming health concern. Even his own doctor, John Hutton, urged Mr. Reagan to pay more attention to the problem.
Our battle against AIDS has been like an emergency room operation. We've thrown everything we have into it. We've declared AIDS public health enemy number 1.
Mr. Reagan said prevention is better than a cure. He sided with his education secretary, William Bennett, and other conservatives who say that the government should not provide sex education to children. The Surgeon General disagrees strongly, believing that children should be taught about condoms and given explicit sex education.
We can no longer afford to sidestep frank, open discussions about sexual practices, heterosexual and homosexual.
I don't quarrel with that, but I think that abstinence has been lacking in much of the education.
That angers some critics.
Until the Reagan administration realizes that the government's responsibility is saving lives and not saving souls, we will continue to see the virus spread through our society.
White House officials confirm that the president has never talked with his Surgeon General about AIDS or read the report Dr. Koop sent him last October.
The fact that it has taken the president 5 years to begin to even address this problem publicly demonstrates that this administration hasn't given it the level of commitment that it deserves.
Gay rights groups in Colorado say they will avoid a new AIDS reporting law by setting up clandestine laboratories and using doctors who will not report their names and addresses to the state health department. The Colorado legislature has passed, and the governor is expected to sign shortly, the bill which allows for criminal prosecution of doctors who fail to turn in the names of people who have AIDS or test positive for the virus. In extreme cases, the health department can also quarantine people with AIDS who refuse to change their sexual habits.
This huge quilt that today is being spread out on the Capitol Mall in Washington has 2,000 panels, every one crafted by the friends and relatives of an AIDS victim. This memorial, the size of 2 football fields, is the brainchild of San Franciscan Cleve Jones.
So we want to show the President and the Congress and the rest of the country the enormity of this epidemic. And with our quilt, we hope to show that enormity by providing people with a glimpse of the faces that are behind all of the statistics.
To date, the AIDS virus has claimed over 24,000 lives, the majority homosexual men.
That we are always threatened by physical violence, and that the potential for discrimination in housing and employment is always there. The unfortunate thing now is that this epidemic is being exploited by preachers and politicians of the far right who deliberately are inflaming ignorance and hysteria against gay people under the guise of concern about an epidemic.
Outside the cathedral, one cop was injured as several thousand more demonstrators converged on the cathedral.
The Catholic Church is the murderer.
The church will be teaching that abortion is the killing of human beings until the end of time. So that's not going to change. The church will be teaching that homosexual activity is sinful until the end of time. That won't change.
You have a right to protest peacefully outside, not to disrupt a service. Now, if you don't like your own religion, then find a religion you like.
Well, here they are, the people at the center of a very, very important political movement underway in America today. Larry Kramer, founder of ACT UP, and author of a number of a book, a play, and other vehicles to remind his fellow countrymen and women of the not only homophobia, but the national, worldwide medical emergency we call AIDS. Why so aggressive and sacrilegious?
We're 10 years into an epidemic. We're with our second president who doesn't give a damn. We've tried all the quiet negotiations. We've tried to be good little boys and girls. We've tried to work within the system. There's a new AIDS death every half hour. We are forced into this position, quite frankly, Phil. At this point, we wanted to be friends with everybody. At this point, we just want to raise the issues. We are dying.
The lie is that condoms don't work. The lie is that monogamy will protect people. The lie is that homosexuality is evil and sinful, but mostly it's women in the South Bronx who are getting infected with this virus because the cardinal tells them that monogamy will protect them and that they don't have to worry about protection with their husbands who are out sharing needles and bringing home the virus.
And they are monogamous with a husband who is HIV positive and therefore capable of catching it, even while obeying the cardinal's admonition not to use condoms.
Exactly.
I get it.
To develop it, the government paid the money to develop it.
About $125 million to bring the average drug to market. Burroughs Wellcome spent
they don't share the profit.
well less than $80 million to bring it to market.
Okay.
They got off cheap, and they did it because the government released it in record time. They got off cheap, and then they subsequently slapped on a price tag that was the largest in history. We're talking about a drug that cost $10,000 a year when it was first released.
But now it's down
We've managed through pressure after 2 years to get that price from $10,000 down to $3,200. And that's a great success for our movement.
This man had a lot to do with it. He chained himself to the stock exchange. He went down to Burroughs Wellcome in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina with 7 friends. He locked himself inside the building. They had to saw him out. That's how we got the price down. We couldn't get it down any other way.
Yes.
I believe that they should have separate hospitals so that the people that have AIDS can go in there and not be in regular hospitals with other people.
Because AIDS is not one single disease. AIDS, which is a very bad word to use and is the source of a great deal of misinformation, is really HIV infection, a virus that eats away at your immune system so that you become vulnerable.
I don't want to catch it when I go to the hospital. I don't want an AIDS patient next to me.
You don't catch it in the hospital.
Look at the
To change the FDA, and we've turned that around
As much as I think that the Catholic Church is a little bit strict, I must say that if you were following what they preach and not having homosexual or taking drugs, nobody would be in this situation. If nobody was shooting drugs.
Practicing heterosexuality
has an obligation to follow the Catholic teachings.
But where did it come from? It came from homosexuality, not heterosexuality.
This virus has no morals. This virus does not have morals. It is transmitted like any disease.
And prostitutes and people. Well, that's the main population who have it, isn't it?
It's a heterosexual disease in Africa.
I don't know of any. All the people I know who've had it are homosexual or junkies.
Tell me why 95% of the people who have AIDS in Africa are heterosexual. Does that mean heterosexuality is evil?
Maybe in Africa, but that's not the case here in America.
There is a God. He is just everywhere in the world, and he would not punish straight people in Africa and gay people in America.
For the first time, the number of AIDS cases passed the 100,000 mark. And there are estimates by the end of 1992, 263,000 Americans will be killed by this disease.
Well,
because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today. I just want to make clear, first of all, that I do not have the AIDS disease, because I know a lot of you want to know that, but the HIV virus.